Hi everybody, and welcome back to the Campus Catalog YouTube channel. My name is Jag, and in this video we are going to be covering Alberta Student Aid. Now before you say to yourself, I don't need a student loan, I don't want to apply for student aid, I'd recommend you watch this video in its entirety, because by applying to Alberta Student Aid, you make yourself eligible for scholarships, bursaries, and loans. And if you don't apply, you are leaving money on the table. So before we get started, make sure you hit that like button and that subscribe button to support our channel and to stay informed about the latest content we put out. All right, let's get started. What is Alberta Student Aid? Well, Alberta Student Aid is a government program that is supported by the provincial government of Alberta as well as the federal government of Canada. And ultimately, this program has been put together to support post-secondary students in their education journey by providing them with financial resources to pay for their education, and ultimately this pool of money is provided so that students don't necessarily have to go to banks or other lenders that might be a little bit more costly. So this is a government program that is put together to encourage students to actually participate in the post-secondary education process, whether that's university or college. This program is available for full-time studies as well as part-time studies. So when you go onto the Alberta Student Aid website, you will see that there is a separate application for full-time students as well as part-time students. So no matter what the circumstance you are in, there is a process for you in order to access these funds. Let's talk about program eligibility. In order to receive funds from Alberta Student Aid, you need to meet certain criteria. And those criteria include, you must be a Canadian citizen, a permanent resident, or a person with protected person status. In addition, you must be a resident of Alberta. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, you must be going to a program or be participating in a program that is eligible to receive these funds. And you can find out whether your program is eligible to receive these funds on the Alberta Student Aid website. Let's talk about the application process. Now, applying to Alberta Student Aid is relatively simple and pretty straightforward. What you need to have accessible when you're going through this application process is some personal information like your address, your phone number, your email address. You will also need your social insurance number, your Alberta student number, as well as information around which program you're going to be applying to, what school you're going to be going to, how long that program is going to take to complete, and then also you will need information related to your finances. So how much is tuition going to cost? What is your living expenses going to be? What is the income that you are going to be contributing to your education? Whether you have financial support from your family or from a spouse, all of that financial information will be asked of you when you go through the application process. Now, by putting this information into the online portal, the Alberta Student Aid folks are going to tell you whether you are actually eligible to receive those funds. Now, keep in mind, if you are turned away from these funds, I highly recommend that you apply next year, or you could even consider appealing that decision. Just a little anecdote, when I was applying for my student aid, I was successful in receiving those funds, whereas my brother, who had applied a few years earlier, did not receive those funds. So just by a change in circumstance, the folks at this organization will determine your eligibility, and just because your sibling was perhaps turned away doesn't necessarily mean that you won't get it. So it makes sense to put yourself out there and just apply because there's a lot of benefit that comes from receiving these funds. For full-time students, the process of actually completing an application is you go onto the Alberta Student Aid website, create an account, verify your identity, and then essentially go through the process of providing your personal information and your budgetary requirements in order to determine whether you are actually eligible to receive these funds. If you are a part-time student, make sure you complete the part-time application form, as your questions are going to be a little bit different. After you apply, it will take a couple of days for Alberta Student Aid to process your application. So don't be alarmed. And in some cases, it can take up to 8 weeks. So there is a little bit of a lag in the time that you might get a response. Don't be alarmed, that is to be expected from Alberta Student Aid. And when you do get a response, you'll have one of 3 responses. One is an award letter indicating how much of a loan or a grant that you will be receiving. The second option is a request for additional information. Perhaps there was something missing in your application and Alberta Student Aid needs a little bit more information. You might be asked to provide that additional piece of information. And thirdly, you might receive a rejection letter which says you are not eligible based on your financial circumstances. Again, I would recommend either appealing that decision if you so wish, or applying in a future year as your financial circumstance could vary. For those students that will be receiving a loan or a grant, you must complete your loan agreement that will be accompanied by the letter that you do receive. And in addition to this, your school must confirm that you're registered in the program that is stated in your application. Now, this part is very important. As you are progressing in your education, if you change your status from full-time to part-time, you really want to think about the implications to your student loan. By moving from a full-time status to a part-time status, this changes the amount that you are eligible for. So in the event that you drop a course because you're not performing as well as you'd like, and that triggers a part-time status for yourself, you might find yourself in a situation where you actually have to pay some of those funds back to Alberta Student Aid earlier than you anticipated as a result of the change in your status. Let's talk about how you actually receive this money. So the earliest you can get that money from your student loan or grant is 1 week prior to your classes starting. Student Aid will pay tuition and mandatory fees directly to your school and deposit any remaining money into the bank account for which you provided information in your application process. Now, while graduation seems like it is a lifetime away, let's quickly talk about how you actually repay these student loans. So as you approach graduation, you will start receiving letters from an organization called the National Student Loans Service Center, or the NSLSC. All Canadian students that have taken a government-issued loan repay to the NSLSC, not to the provincial student loan provider. Getting closer to graduation, you will start receiving these letters indicating that they anticipate that you are going to be graduating soon and that your loans will be eligible for repayment starting shortly. For the first 6 months after graduation, your loans will remain interest-free and you are not required to repay any of that money. After that 6-month grace period is over, you are required to start making repayments on those student loans, whether they are monthly repayments or one lump sum payment. That is up for you to decide. Now, if you are going to maintain those student loans for a longer period, you will have to note that you will be charged interest upon those loans. So you want to keep in mind that after 6 months, you are going to be charged a little bit of money for having those loans outstanding, the same way that you would be charged for a credit card balance that is overdue. So plan that out. Make sure you have a game plan upon graduation. Once you have landed that first career job, that first stable job, you might want to plan out how quickly you are going to be paying back these student loans. So in conclusion, whether you think you are going to be relying on student loans or not, it is recommended that you put in an application to Alberta Student Aid. By doing so, you will make yourself eligible for scholarships, bursaries, and grants. And if you don't put in an application, you unfortunately will not be considered for these funding opportunities. Also, your university or college will have scholarships that are unique to that school, and by applying to Alberta Student Aid, you make yourself eligible for those additional funding sources. In those applications, in those scholarship applications, they often ask if you've applied to Alberta Student Aid, and the answer to that will determine whether you are eligible for that scholarship. So if you don't take that first step of applying, you make yourself ineligible for these additional funding sources. If you found this information useful, please make sure you hit that like button to support our channel. We really need those likes to help out our channel, and please hit the subscribe button to stay informed on any additional content that we put out. Until next time.